Thank you for tuning in to this episode of U of L's Online But Not Alone podcast. My name is Connor Makowiak, and I'm joined today by Dr. Eli Brainard of the University of Louisville School of Medicine, where he serves as the program director of U of L's online Master of Science in Physiology. Both the MS in Physiology program and the School of Medicine are offered by the University of Louisville, a leader in medical research and patient care, where faculty and students identify and reach new frontiers in medical training and innovation. Today's conversation centers around a recent article by Bridget Balch of the Association of American Medical Colleges, which reported in December of 2025 that after a recent dip in medical school enrollments, applications increased 5.3% from 2024. This is consistent with recent reporting from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which reports an estimated 1.9 million openings for healthcare occupations from 2024 through 2034. These statements reinforce the notion that healthcare and healthcare occupations in the United States continues to grow year over year. This brings us several questions. What will this career growth look like in the years ahead as new and emerging technologies like AI in medicine continue to advance? What education and backgrounds do learners today need to complete to remain competitive in a changing healthcare landscape? And how are the students of today preparing for the medical challenges of tomorrow? To further discuss these topics and more, I'd like to hand things over to today's guest, Dr. Brainard. Dr. Brainard, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Please share a little bit about yourself, your professional background, your experience, and a little bit about the online Masters in Physiology.
Sure. So my name's Eli Brainard. I have a bachelor's in biology from Western Kentucky University. I minored in chemistry, was one course shy of the chemistry major, but I didn't want to put off going to grad school for an entire year. So went to actually here for my graduate program. So I went through the actual program we're going to be talking about. So I'm a graduate of that, the Master's in Physiology. Stayed on and got my doctoral degree in cardiovascular physiology. We were looking at a specific protein and how that protein is modified. It's a little more technical, but it's definitely fun and interesting for geeks like myself. So I finished. I finished that in 2012, and then went to do a postdoctoral fellowship in Orlando, Florida, with Dr. Dan Kelly. Looking at lipotoxicity and looking into different adaptations of muscle and utilization of metabolism. So he's a big PGC1 alpha, for those of you that know these transcription factors out there. So it was during that time that I realized that I really loved teaching and interacting with students and other healthcare professionals. And while I loved research, I didn't really want to pursue that as my career goal. And so it was about that time that I started at a college down there, teaching at a college. Now college is kind of a misnomer. Valencia College is the biggest feeder school for UCF. So we had about 60,000 students at Valencia College. And so I started teaching there and fell absolutely in love with interacting with students and really the need for a shift, which we'll probably talk more later, a shift from memorization of facts to one that is more equipping our students with the critical thinking skills so that they can approach any problem, even problems they haven't seen or heard before, and have the tools, have the arrows in their quiver, so to speak, to be able to look at the problem, analyze it, and come up with a solution, right? So it was about 4 years into teaching at Valencia College that I got a recruitment request from my old faculty members here at the University of Louisville. So that was about 2017. So my wife is from here, so academic positions don't come up too often. So we thought about it. We said, we've got a good thing going here in Florida, but at the end of the day, we made the decision to move back here, and it was a fantastic decision. So we did that in 2017, and so I have been a full-time faculty member at the Department of Physiology ever since then.
That's outstanding. You started with cardiovascular physiology, is that what you said?
Correct, yeah.
What was the, you already talked a little bit about it, but at that time, did you think teaching was in your future, or?
I kind of knew that teaching focus was in my future when we would be when I would be in undergrad or I would be in graduate school and we would be prepping for an exam, right? The exam day, you've just got, all the nerves are there, all the feels are there. And we would come the day of the exam and I would tell students, I'd be like, all right, my classmates, let's meet at the library 2 hours early and let's walk each other through this. And so it ended up being that I was the one that was leading the most of those, not by choice, but just because that's kind of what happened. So I really, and it was really funny. One of the students one of my classmates at the time, he's now actually a faculty member at U of L doing research. He wasn't able to study the night before because he had another job, and he said, Eli, hey, can you please just give me the short and sweet of it. Give me the Cliff Notes, right? Hopefully that's still a germane reference right there. I'm not sure if it is, but give me the Cliff Notes edition of this. And so I did, and wouldn't you know it was a biochemistry exam, and he scored higher on it than I did.
No kidding.
I was so mad about that. I said, he's like, hey, you're a great teacher. Yeah. So that and many other sort of smaller instances where I loved. It wasn't that I loved telling other people what I know. It was more of I loved engaging in the discourse of science, the discourse of cardiovascular physiology, the discourse of whatever it is that I realized that I do have a passion and hopefully a little bit of skill at teaching. That's yet to be seen though.
Well, something else you said really kind of hit home for me, which was providing students the tools they need to be able to digest and understand
Yes.
and process
Yep.
this information. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, I wrapped up my MBA program a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and as a result of meeting so many of my colleagues online, we're hanging out for the first time in person, and something that kind of came up time and again in these conversations was, no, I don't necessarily have something I learned over a year and a half ago memorized, but I know where to go to reference that information
right.
and how to pursue it.
That's
Or,
right.
hey, if I'm presented with this problem set, no, I'm not going to remember exactly how the textbook said this is how it breaks down. But whenever those conversations come up, I recognize the terms, I recognize
That's
the
right.
processes, I recognize how to pursue that information. So looking at the learners of today and how students are evolving and preparing for the world ahead, I do think that skill set that, okay, I know enough to pursue. I know
Mhm.
enough to initiate conversation. I know
Right.
enough to recognize I don't know this perfectly. Let me get more information and get back to you. I think that is going to be a more relevant skill set, increasingly so in the decade ahead.
I 100% agree, and it depends on. I've had these conversations so many times, and one thing that I like to reference to my students and to anybody I have these conversations with is that there was a traditional learning, right, didactic learning, the classroom. In the 70s, 80s, there was a shift from focusing on critical thinking skills and equipping our students to be the professionals that they need to more of a shift of, hey, memorization. Let's memorize this. And I think that's such a tragedy because we need to be able to equip our students for situations that we don't even know that they'll come up with, right? So there's going to be aspects of critical thinking interwoven to every single thing that we do in our master's program here at U of L. There's and I give this slide to my students. It's a Dr. Ebbinghaus. So he was a psychologist back in the early 1900s, and he had something what's called the forgetting curve. And this forgetting curve basically says that he had a group of individuals, patients, right? And he showed them some note cards and said, okay, I want you to, just look at these and just look at them and take them in. And it was like a rabbit or an elephant or whatever else. And then he took 1 minute and then he said, okay, now tell me of the 5 note cards that I gave you, how many can you remember? Well, 1 minute later, they could remember all of them, right? He did the same experiment and but he did it about an hour. And then it dropped from 100 to 80.
Mm.
And then he did it to a day, and it dropped from 80 to 50. And he went all the way to 30 days out, so 1 month out, and only 20% of the content that he showed them that these students could remember. What is the point of this? The point is that and we see this, you could probably even see this in your master's course that you just finished, is that we really only retain long-term 20% are around there, right? The numbers might be different sometimes, but only 20% of what we actually take in, of the information that we're bombarded with, we only have 20%. So my approach to building this master's degree, and even before we built this online master's degree, we had a face-to-face program. We still do. It's a fantastic 11-month program. I tell my students, I say, listen, I want to focus so much on the 20% that's important, and we go over it and we think about it in different ways. We talk about it. We have discussions. We engage what's called active learning, where I'm not just the sage on the stage, but I'm the guide on the side. And we go over that so much so that when we finish with this program, I'm not concerned that you have memorized every single iota of information, but you understand the 20%, you know the 20%, the core content, so much so that you go away from here and it's going to transform your life. And I really try to push that focus with not only our face-to-face, but online as well.
That's what I was just about to ask. Do you find that online students are receptive to that kind of teaching in an online modality?
Well, this is very interesting. So there's a lot of different modalities, right? There's online synchronous, remote, there's asynchronous, and that's what our program is. Our program is asynchronous. And so when my boss, Dr. Joshua, came to me a year and a half ago and wanted me to sort of lead this program, and it's not just leading the program, but it's leading the development from the ground up. And one of my stipulations was, hey, I need free reign to make this as how I envision this, and I don't want us to be just another master's program where the majority of them are out there. What are they? They're just copy and pastes of the face-to-face classroom. Yeah, they'll throw in an activity here. Yeah, they'll throw in this. I wanted to not only meet the bar, but I wanted to blow the bar so far out of the water that we're going to be nationally and internationally known for our program and also our students. Right? How do you know? Sort of the efficacy of a program? It's by the fruit, right? It's by the students and how well they do in the wild, right? In the open, and so. What we've done is we've tried not to reinvent the wheel where something is already really great, but what we've done is we've added in different aspects of our program, which we believe are unique to our program. We haven't seen anybody else do it, that really enhance the experience, that engage our students even in an asynchronous program. And that's the hardship, right? How do you personalize, how do you humanize an experience that is asynchronous and online, right? And so we've come up with what we believe are some pretty novel and innovative ways to engage students, to help them feel part of the community. And as you know, like with anything, if someone is engaged, if someone is enthusiastic about it, it's going to mitigate attrition, right? So it's going to prevent them from sort of falling off, or prevent them, from saying, "Oh, I'm too busy," or "Oh, this life circumstance happened, so I can't continue on, and I'm just going to quit because I'm never going to be able to get done with this." And it was a good thing that I had going, but I can't do that, right? So we've got tons of different aspects of our program that we feel are unique that really help engage students to help them not only equip them to think critically, but help them succeed in the classroom and beyond.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into kind of the crux of today's conversation. I'd like to reference again to those numbers that I cited in the beginning. Despite a recent dip in medical school enrollments, applications increased by 5.3% from 2024 through 2025. Which is consistent with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which cited, I think I said, about 1.9 million openings in healthcare.
Right.
For reference, when I looked at those numbers and kind of what inspired pursuit of these articles and this conversation, the previous podcast I recorded was with Dr. Lee Bewley. He's the program director for the Master of Science in Health Administration. And there were two numbers that really stood out to me, or two facts, I'll say, that really stood out to me. Which is that depending on your source, healthcare spending in the U.S. is around $3 to $5 trillion, anywhere from 3 to 5 times as much as what we spend on national defense. But
Right.
despite that, almost every healthcare organization or every healthcare system in the country is completely strapped financially. So
That's right.
competing forces, there's trillions of dollars in circulation for this industry, but on the other hand, everyone is kind of strapped. And in spite of that, we're seeing 5.3% medical school enrollment.
That's right.
And we're seeing 1.9 million jobs forecasted over the next 10 years, factoring and accounting for things like AI and healthcare. So Having said all that, I was curious what your general thoughts are on health-related careers or health-related education, at least in 2026. I know that's a very, very broad question,
Yes,
but
very yeah. So let's talk about the job growth, right? So despite where the economy goes, whether it goes up and down, whether you have this political party in charge or this one in charge, what we see happening is by and large, I think this may have been a little bit down, but we see humans lifespan getting longer, right? And so with that elongating lifespan, you're going to have individuals that are going to need more healthcare. They're going to need more treatment. They're going to need more physicians. They're going to need more dentists. They're going to need all these healthcare professionals that are in between, hundreds in between all of the ones that I listed. And so I think that's why we see this continued job growth. I think I was reading as well. It's like the number one driving labor statistic for new jobs being added, like above blue collar jobs.
yep.
So I'm a blue collar. I'm a product of a blue collar family. My mom's a school teacher. My dad's a carpenter, right? So I grew up framing. I grew up working in the ditches, digging ditches, doing foundation, doing drywall, doing electrical, doing plumbing, all of this stuff. And I was surprised to see that over the next 10 years, they're actually projecting more job growth, more new job growth in healthcare-related fields than in the blue-collar sector. And that's despite what you had mentioned, like AI or the potential or the unlimited sort of unknown vast expanse that AI can potentially bring to our world.
Yeah, I think I saw, and I don't want to misquote this, but I think last week I saw either New York Times or Wall Street Journal report that healthcare-related fields accounted for something like a third of the labor force right
It's
now.
insane. It really is insane.
Yeah, well, the other side of it too, you mentioned all the different specialists and all the different openings in medical-related careers and fields. Something that I came across in my own studies was the concept of social determinants of health, those
Mm,
being the many different things that play an interconnected role in someone's health outcomes or the
right.
health situations they may face. Which is all to say, as healthcare as an industry continues to grow and expand, I think we are even still discovering new and untold ways that uh, how our health is interconnected, how it's all related, and how it all ties in together into the person that you are.
Right, right. And with those job statistics, it's interesting and it might be jumping the gun, but when you look at the disparities between men and women, and you look at there has been a large, I don't want to say resurgent, but a large need for blue collar workers, and you see that some of these statistics show that women are at an all time high for enrollment and not only matriculation but graduation. And so men are lagging behind that, and I wonder if there's a discussion to be had with the draw of potentially these blue collar workers for men, which might be a little bit more of a traditional normal fit for them, which is why we see the disparity in the sexes between matriculation to these healthcare professional programs.
Absolutely. And that actually ties into the next thing I was going to ask you, which is, what are some of the conversations that you're having with students, other faculty, other peers, or other people in the medical community or the healthcare communities?
So that's a broad question. So really, and it's exciting, right? It's exciting to see what the future is going to hold, right? Because these questions that I have we'll start with students, right? They want to know, like, is this going to prepare me for whatever job I'm going to be able to apply to? Am I going to be able to get in the job? Is this going to be something that is helpful? And we resoundingly not only just say 100% yes, right? But we quote statistics like we've seen right here, where healthcare workers, are going to be the number one driving force for or area where new job growth is going to be. And so couple that with what I was saying before about our population, getting older and longevity potentially increasing. I think I was, last year, I think Craig Ventner, right? I don't know if you know Craig Ventner with the Ventner Institute. He was one of the first pioneering scientists to look at decoding the human genome. And so his whole thing is wanting to extend the lifestyle, right? Or not lifestyle, sorry, life expectancy, lifespan.
Right.
And you see everybody jumping on this. You see Silicon Valley individuals. I think the term that they use now is called biohacking, where they do these little things to try to optimize their health. And so there's several really good books out there, and different approaches. But we have conversations with students about this. We have conversations with students about optimizing health. I tell students, listen, physiology. This is the core crux of being. I mean, that's where the word physician comes from. Physio, right? And so when you look at physiology, if you can understand the mechanism, not just memorize some concept, but if you can truly understand the mechanism of normal physiology and then the mechanism of disease, that's when you can start to really make a change. You can start to make a plan to say, okay, instead of, you've got a patient who comes in who's obese, right? Who has a lot of complications with this. Well, say one of those things is high blood pressure, like hypertension, right? Systemic arterial hypertension. Instead of putting them on a high blood pressure medication, looking at ways to change their lifestyle, right? Instead of just putting them on a medication. Now, I'm not saying don't do the medication. You definitely need to go on the medication if your physician tells you to. And once again, just disclaimer: I'm not a physician, right? I'm a PhD, not an MD. But one of the things that I really hammer into students is that, because physiology gets to it, it's looking at the root cause, right? It's looking at what is the root mechanism. And I feel like today there's a lot of emphasis on treating the symptom. And you could cite, okay, patient compliance is down, right? You tell the patient to go and eat better, eat less, exercise, and they just don't do it by and large. And in fact, if you look at or interview a lot of physicians, this is probably one of the biggest gripes. And unfortunately, a lot of them just kind of give up telling patients to live a healthy lifestyle or make lifestyle modifications, because they're just not going to do it, right? And I don't know if that's an American thing, or if our lifestyle is so stressed that we just don't have time. We just want the pill, right? Give me the pill to fix the problem so I can do my job and everything else. But really, truly, if you look at like lifestyle quality, when we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we really start to see a decline right towards end of life. And what if we could push back the decline? Say we maybe we increase lifespan a little bit. Maybe it's 78 right now. Maybe we expand it to 85, right? Extend it. That's great. But what if we could extend the time period leading up to that, where you live a full and healthy life, right? Where you're not on 10 different medications. And I think the statistic is that there's 50% of Americans that are 50% or 50 years and older are on at least one or more chronic medications. And when you look at that, it's just, as a physiologist, as someone who tries to practice what they preach, right? Live healthy and just really make wise decisions in terms of the physiology. It's such a tragedy to see that, when you're 50, it's just now you're on this medication, now you're on this one, right? So whether it's good or bad, that's my personal philosophy. Now, that doesn't always work. So what I do is I tell my students, I'm like, listen, you need to be prepared to think outside the box, right? Don't just prescribe that pill to someone. If you go to medical school, if you become a pharmacist, if you become a nurse practitioner, don't just give them the solution to treating their symptom. Look at the root cause. And so that's one of the things we try to emphasize here at University of Louisville School of Medicine, Department of Physiology. Those are a lot of the conversations that we're having. We have a lot of conversations about ethics. We have a lot of conversations about, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but AI, that is one of the biggest things that we're looking into. Conversations of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, Dr. B? Because I'm not going to have a job, or what do I do? How do I utilize this? How can we utilize this not only to get a job, but create jobs and enhance patient care, right? Or student care. How can we do that? So those are a lot of the conversations we're having, and we're constantly trying to, with the faculty members, not only at the Department of Physiology, but with the whole School of Medicine, looking to try to really push the cutting edge, right? Like push the envelope and try to really develop novel ways to think outside the box, to come up with solutions that nobody has come up with, and let's try them. Academia is an amazing atmosphere to try new things in, to try out these ideas, to really explore what that would entail, and really make an impact on not only our current students, because they see the process, but also our future students who benefit from the progress that we've made.
Well, one of the things, and we'll jump into that AI conversation in just a moment, but one of the things you said was physician compliance. Which at the end of the day, if you're practicing physiology or if you're practicing medicine, the end result can and should be
Mhm.
that your patient does what you tell them to do. I want to give a quick shout out, actually, because this topic came up again weeks ago in my case. Dr. Kellen Choi, who I believe is a urologist with U of L Health. She's also a professor for one of the MBA Business of Healthcare courses, Compassion and Healthcare Leadership. And one of the main things that she stated that we all took away was physician compliance in many cases comes down to um, the perceived degree of compassion. How
Mm,
much do I, as a patient, think my doctor cares about me?
mm.
In some cases, yeah, I feel like my doctor is invested or my physician is bought into my health and my well being. In some cases, I'm another number on a long sheet they've got to see by the end of the day. So, hearing that and hearing again that interconnectedness and how it plays a role, I thought was fascinating. The other thing, you describe quality of life, and I think educational buy-in. And I don't necessarily mean education from the academic sense. I mean more so from we're learning about things daily, weekly about our health, different products we can or should not consume, different ways of living. Simple things.
Mm,
Make sure you drink enough water, get enough
that's right.
sunshine. Maybe you should exercise and work out. I saw a very interesting interview. I'm not going to forget who this was, but it was someone from one of the European countries. And the question was, what is a misconception you have about Americans or that you had about people in the United States before visiting? And he said that, of course, you hear all the time about the obesity epidemic in the United States. And one of the things he noted was like, yeah, sure, there are plenty of overweight people, but almost every American he ran into at least did something for exercise. Or,
Mhm.
maybe that's not going to a gym. Maybe that's not necessarily doing, a spin class or CrossFit,
Sure.
but they're going to the gym and lifting weights. So they're going for longer walks. There's an increased buy-in and certainly increased awareness for these foundational elements of
Right.
health. So hearing that those are the conversations that you're having with your students, I would not be shocked if more and more Gen Z and Gen Alpha, as the years kind of continue, they come in with a stronger understanding of some of these things already in place. So it's awesome to hear that it's awesome to hear you say that. It's awesome to hear that that's more and more of a consideration as we continue along. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was gonna touch upon that, with just a quick note on that. You said the patient compliance is directly related to how much they feel that the physician cares and empathizes with them, and so it's a longer conversation and a really cool rabbit hole. We don't have to probably don't have time to dive down into it, but if you look at, 100, years ago, look at the organization of healthcare, it was a local physician cared for a local body of a local community, right? And from the babies to the 20s all the way up to the 80-year-old, right? They cared for you. Hashtag Little House on the Prairie and Doc, right? So it was like that, and so they saw their physicians regularly. They saw them outside of the clinic. They saw them outside of these other areas, and they really got to know them as individuals. And so when you know someone, right, you're going to put more emphasis on what they tell you and put more sort of lend their viewpoints more credence, especially if they are one who's been trained in that healthcare field. And so it's a little bit of a hard thing when you only see your patients when they're sick, or you only see them once a year to get that patient buy-in, and they have such limited amount of time because these big, hospitals and everything else, these big corporations, they unfortunately there's a lot of push towards numbers, right?
Increasing throughput.
Exactly, getting through that, and that's a tragedy, right, for our patients because if they don't see that you care, if they see that you're just another number, if you're another checked box to get through out of 500 in the day, why should they care? Why should they care
Right.
what you think? They're going to go live their life. They're going to do this, and so really bringing not only the care, but just like really truly conveying that you care, not just by your actions in that 20-minute doctor visit. And it's probably only like 10 minutes, but really, looking and thinking outside the box of different ways to show our patients that we care that are outside the clinic, and they've started to do these outreach programs, right? Where they have physicians, where they have healthcare workers go out into the community and make their presence known and really try to help make an impact. It's hard, but there are efforts there. But that is 100% one of the biggest challenges that I hear from physicians when talking with patients about compliance.
Well, let's go ahead and transition then into conversation about certainly AI in medicine, AI in healthcare, and then how the the Masters in Physiology program here helps students prepare for that, especially in an online modality like we talked about, because some of those things you're describing, I don't want to call them soft skills, but emotional connection, empathy, compassion, those are things that can be hard to teach, let alone communicate, and certainly not in an online format. So my question is going to be, looking at the AI landscape and looking at the healthcare landscape and how things are going to change. I do believe that there's still very much going to be a human element to that. How does the Masters in Physiology program here help prepare students for what is coming with AI in healthcare? And then more specifically, how does the program help them to learn those soft skills they might not have learned otherwise?
Right. So that's a great question. So when we look at sort of, we were talking about this before as well. Going from the '80s where it wasn't digital, everything was analog, right? Going to the '90s, then you had the advent and widespread use of the internet, and then getting into the digital age, and then social media and all this other stuff. There is a desensitization to their ability to convey even emotion, right? And when I'm saying they is like all of us, right? As we're part of society, I do feel like it is a challenge, but it is something that is utterly necessary for patient care, yes, but also letting your students know that you care, right? You're going to see your patient if you're a clinician. If they're sick, you'll see them routinely. If it's a chronic illness, but by and large, a lot of the patients that a lot of these physicians see, they come into their doctor when they're sick, they get healthy, then they go away. They never really see them, right? But with students, right, or educating these students, we've got a year with them, or we have a year and a half or 2 years, however long their program is, and they see that you care. And I have seen this over and over, time and time again. I've seen students try harder when they see that I care about them more so than just being someone who's filling a seat, right? When they see that I care, they try harder on the exams. They when they see me bending over backwards to provide content and or mechanisms to help them learn that I don't have to. I don't get paid any extra for doing this, right? I do this because I want to help them learn. I have a passion for helping students learn. When they see that, they respond. They notice it and they respond. And so despite sort of the desensitization that's going on, when they see that in a professor, when they see their professor cares, then that really helps them to not only see what it looks like to have a really good professor and or physician, but it also spurs them on, right? When you see someone who's being fit and healthy, even if it's on a commercial or whatever, Psychology 101, you want to see yourself that, right? And if you have someone who's enthusiastic, then you're gonna buy in essentially. And so that's what we're seeing with our students. And so I think your question was looking at AI as well.
Yeah,
Could you repeat that part? What was it?
mostly just how does this program help prepare students to learn not just about physiology, about healthcare applications, about medicine, but also how to adequately learn about that alongside AI, which is changing by the day,
Yes.
by the
Oh
week,
my
by the
goodness,
month.
changing so quickly. If you look at 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, when sort of OpenAI, I guess it's more like 2 years ago, when it came out to where it was and where it is now, it is leaps and bounds. And think about how wowed we all were when it first came out. You're like, whoa, there's this Chat GPT. You can ask it questions and it will synthesize a response. It's not a pre-programmed response, but it'll actually compute and put all these different things together. So how do we equip our students? So I think it goes back to, and this is the hill I'm going to die on, is it goes back to, despite all of these technological advances, despite the advent of AI and how much that's going to change our field, every field, right, is really teaching our students to think critically, think for themselves. I tell my students this, and it'll rub the wrong way, and even some colleagues as well. I tell my students, don't drink the Kool-Aid, okay? Just because you're told something, don't just believe it as fact. And that kind of goes back to the Socratic method, right? Looking at, proposing an experiment, having a question and looking at different ways to approach that question and systematically going through and looking at it. Because too many – listen, I teach in the dental school, the medical school, and the graduate school. And so much of so many of our students will just take, whatever it is, whether it's media, whether it's the AAMC, whatever else, they'll just take the information as though it is fact, right? It is sort of the gospel truth, if you will. And we see that in the medical community. You just have to look back at your history books and see where there are times when the medical community had it wrong, right? We had good intentions, right? But we had it wrong, and there were times when it was to the detriment of the patient or to students or whatever else. So all that to say is, I tell my students, I'm like, think for yourself. Even what I'm telling you, go verify. Where am I getting my data from, right? My data, my information on cardiovascular physiology. Well, this field has been around for hundreds of years, and we've got all of these scientific knowledge that we're basing it off of. Here's the papers that we're doing this. But when you get into when you get into talking about especially medicinal approaches to treating different pathologies, goodness gracious, we better be very careful. We better be very careful how we phrase things, because I tell my students this all the time. You're going to have, and it's cliche, right? You have incredible power when you get that medical degree, when you become a dentist, when you become a pharmacist. You have a lot of power to not only influence people's lives, but you also are the one that are prescribing them medication that change their lives. And so how many times in the past 15 years have we seen pharmaceutical companies push 20 years, 30 years, push a drug that's going to be a panacea. It's going to be the cure-all. It's going to do all this, only to a little bit later we find that, oh, wow, it did what we said it was going to do, but there's these unexpected side effects, so much so that we're going to have to take this drug off the market, or so much so that it's not everything we said that it was going to do or be, but everybody bought it, and so then we have to pull it back. So I don't want to jump too much into all the different aspects of that, but in a broad sense, I tell my students, I'm like, listen, you have got to think for yourself. If I can do anything in this one lecture, in this limited amount of time that I have for you, it is to hammer into you that you need to develop critical thinking skills. And what are those, right? It's developing the skills necessary to approach a problem that you've never seen, you've never come across, and feel confident. I might not know the answer to that, but I can approach the problem and I can start to design ways to figure out what to do, figure out how to do that. And I think that is going to be even more important with AI, with the advent of AI, where we are just giving off what we think of as menial tasks to the AI. I don't want to, we saw this in the advent of the internet, right? I don't want to go and research this and look it up. So whatever, just Google search it, right? Just Yahoo search it or whatever else. And so we've, finding information, that there's a boon to that, right? There's definitely an advantage, and it can advance, even medical technology. But there is also a lost art to being able to understand how to figure out the solution to a problem outside of the internet. And I have students say, Dr. B, well, when am I ever not going to have the internet? Okay. We think that this is, especially students coming up, they think that this is normal. They think that this is going to be forever. Go to any third world country where they're going to have go to California in a season of drought, when they have power outages, like scheduled power outages or water restrictions, right? That's in the United States. What do you think it happens when you go visit Kenya, when you go visit Tanzania, when you go visit South Africa, when you want to affect patients outside your little circle of the American bubble, right? You're not going to have the internet. I mean, maybe with Elon Musk's Skylink or whatever else, right? Maybe you'll have something, but it's a lot harder, and it's not going to be there to help you. It's not going to be there as a crutch for you to put weight on, right? And so I tell my students, and I try to do this, one of the most important things that I can teach you is how to think critically, how to approach a situation with confidence, and not just gain the knowledge in here, but understand how that knowledge impacts the patient. Look at the mechanism, look at the root cause. And it's so crazy. I will have students go through a lot of our traditional courses in our master's program, and you need that foundation, right? You need to build the bricks, right, of the foundation. And then they get to some of the courses that look more at application of physiology. And some of the students who do the best in, like, they have a 4.0 in some of these didactic courses, they get to the application and they do well in it, but it's a process, right? It's a process where you still have to walk them through it, and it's a training, right? It's a training of having them and teaching them how to think on their feet, think on the go, and maybe it's not the right answer, but at least being able to rationalize through a proposed right answer. So long-winded way to say that's kind of the number one factor that I'm still pushing students with AI is, yes, use AI. It's fantastic. I'm excited to see what's the future's going to hold. But don't forget, like, it all comes back. If you want to affect people, if you really want to affect people, it is looking about or focusing in on the mechanism, the physiology, and once again, kind of going back to what we said, caring about your patient, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the closing thing is that I was saying is like, it's caring about a patient, letting them know that you care, because at the end of the day, they're human, you're human, right? You're not in here to get a paycheck. Yes, this does pay the bills. But at the end of their life, people don't say, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have had more patients come through my clinic to check off the boxes, right? When you look at end of life, one of their biggest regrets is, I wish I would have spent more time with the relationships that mattered to me, family, friends, my circles, right? Maybe it's your small group of patients or whatever else. It's not, I wish I would have spent more time working, or wish I would have spent more time doing this. And so that's what I really try to push in our program is to humanize it, even in the online program. And that's a challenge with the online that we have to overcome. But we've got some novel ways that we do overcome it, and it's a fantastic program.
We talked right before this a little bit about intentionality and how much of a recurring theme that seems to be both becoming and emerging, and always has been. I was just in different conversations that I've had with colleagues on campus or around the U of L community. This is very much a thing nationally and internationally. The higher education industry, for lack of a term, is very, very worried about enrollment numbers, especially with AI becoming what
Right.
it is. On the other hand, or on the other side of that, though, there is a tremendous confidence and a almost belief that, in spite of AI, we may actually face an educational renaissance if we have access to all the information that has ever existed.
That's right.
What does it mean if you can't use it or apply it? And I think that's even reflected too in something I saw from Wall Street Journal the other day. You've heard about the AI data centers going up around the
Oh,
country.
yes. Yep.
You've likely heard about the resistance to these AI
Mhm.
data centers going up
Right.
around the country. So the example that they used was of a small town in Missouri. The town overwhelmingly voted against these data centers, and there were greater consequences for the city council folk
Right.
involved with that. But it speaks to a broader truth, I think, that there is hesitation toward AI, generally speaking. But that's across other jobs, other industries, to say nothing of who's taking care of your health.
That's right.
So, having said all that, and I think what it ties into is kind of the last questions that I have for this afternoon's conversation. Um, you've already touched a little bit on some of the coursework elements, but the two questions that I have are specifically when those conversations come up, those more existential conversations about, hey, I want to further my education, but I'm worried about what might be on the other side of that. If AI is going to take, maybe not my job, but take away some of what I can do or provide. How do you address those concerns? And then what specifically does the physiology program offer to students curriculum-wise that will prepare them despite what may come one way or the other with AI?
Right. So those are great questions. So I'm going to talk about kind of in backwards order, right? So
Sure.
the first one, like, what can the physiology program, the online physiology program, do for them? And so one of the things that we really tout as a just an amenity of our program is that we work around your schedule. It is asynchronous and it is online. So we have students that are in the military that are in the Strait of Hormuz right now. We have students that are deployed all over the United States. We have students that are on all different walks of life, and so we really work, and we're very happy to offer a program that works with students' schedules, right? The flexibility of their schedule. We also offer timelines, right? So you go to undergrad, right? And most people finish undergrad in 4 years, right? You have got kind of like a timeline schedule. Same thing for the master's, same thing for, medical school. Typically, start day is this, you graduate. If everything goes well, you graduate in 4 years. With our online master's in physiology, we wanted to provide the flexibility that we could that every day, the everyday Joe, the blue collar worker, or the healthcare professional who wanted to increase their knowledge base, who wanted to increase their ability to help their patients, we wanted to provide different timelines so that they could get it done in a sort of what we call an accelerated timeline, which you can get done in about 17 months or even a little bit quicker, or a normal timeline, 22 months, or a relaxed fit, right? It's one size doesn't fit all here. So what we're doing, and we have the capability to do with the online program, is really tailor the experience, tailor the timeline so that it meets your need. It meets your schedule. We have a student in the past who had, they were going to have a big event. It was the birth of twins, or multiple kids, right, in the summer. And we were able to allow them the flexibility to take it a little bit more relaxed, even shift from the accelerated to a little bit more relaxed. And then once the waves sort of settle with that, then be able to go and pick back up the pace. So that is one of the things that I think AI allows us. It's actually helped us to do because we're creating these. And we could do it without AI. Don't get me wrong. We could do it, but
Sure.
it takes so much longer to do this. And with AI, we're able to make these almost like a individualized student learning plan. And that just sort of side tangent. There was a really neat school. We're talking about education and AI, and this is a conversation I've had with my students. There's a school in Texas. I think it was called the Alpha School or Alpha Program. I think it was Plano, Texas. And what they did for 2025 is they wanted to look at what it would be like to have students on a program where only AI taught them. So they didn't have teachers. They had what are called guides. And these guides help facilitate learning, and they did this. But the learning it wasn't just on the computer. It was determined by AI. So every student was on a different, sort of slightly different trajectory. If Johnny had trouble with basic arithmetic, the AI would figure that out, and they would focus more on the arithmetic. You'd have the guides on the sides really helping to feed into that, to do everything they could to help. And then, if Jill over here, right, had problems with science, right, or problems with English, right, then AI but was fine in mathematics, right? They would focus on this part. And so it created this individualized learning program for every single student that came through that program. And they were able to do this because they had, some surveys or some different determining factors. Sort of adaptive learning is what it's called in the active learning field. And we actually have some of this incorporated into our and we hope to incorporate way more into our master's program. And so what they found is that students learned better, they learned more, and in fact, I think the calculation, the article, reported that they were able to, at least if they stayed on that pace, have students progress through 2 whole letter grades in a single year as opposed to 1. Now, it's not about speed when you're at the lower levels, but the takeaway message for me is that this is a powerful tool to really help our students where they are and with all the sort of distractions that they have. Some students have, 2 or 3 kids. Some have 5 kids like I do, right? Some of them don't have any kids, but they've got 3 jobs, and they really want to get out of the blue collar and into the sort of the healthcare field, or the white collar, as they say. And so if we were able to utilize AI and harness AI to the benefit of our students by thinking outside the box and having them, create these programs, I really do think that's going to just transform the field of education. And like you said, have like an educational renaissance, because now you don't necessarily have to be restricted to the university geographical location, right? We saw this with online classes, but the problem with online class, well, not a problem, but one of the drawbacks of online is that we see a lot of attrition, right? We see a lot of students falling off or not as high student success rate. One of the things we do in our online master's program is that we have the exact same exam questions that we have in our face-to-face program. So we're actually getting ready we're working on a manuscript, a project comparing and contrasting online and face-to-face. But by and large, while we do see that our online students perform differently, they don't perform any worse, right? They might perform differently in different subjects, which tells me that, hey, we need to go back to our online area that's talking about renal physiology, and let's really rework this online learning module so that we can really pour into this so that we can get those questions back up to snuff. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that's I'm an optimist, right? I'm an eternal optimist. It could be, like that whole little meme with that little dog in the fire, and he's
This
like,
is fine.
everything is fine.
Yeah,
This is
we're
fine.
good.
We're good. We're all good.
Yeah.
But I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about student learning, and that's one of the biggest things that I'm excited about for this online master's program that we launched in fall of 2025 is really innovating and helping students learn. One of the many different amenities that we have that sets us apart from other online programs is we have GTAs that are specifically hired and specifically work with our online students. So
And that's graduate teaching assistants.
that's exactly right. Graduate teaching assistants. So these students, they're not just, Joe Schmo off the street. These are our top students in our face-to-face program. We actually recruit them to become a GTA for the next year because a lot of them are applying to these programs where you have to apply a year in advance. And so they're like, this is great. We've done really well in the master's program here, online and or face-to-face. And what are we going to do for the year that we are in a gap? And we actually get those questions, Dr. B. What should I do? I've got 1,000 shadowing hours for whatever profession I want. What can I do? Well, you could go become a technician, which would be great. It'd get you some benchtop experience. But we're offering the top students GTA positions, these graduate teaching assistantships, where they come in and they work not only with students, but they work to help develop and modify and make the program better. So we're actually getting feedback for a year from the students who just went to the program and they said, okay, this was great, but maybe this area, I really struggle with this. Okay, that's great. You've got good feedback. Let's focus in. That's what you're going to be working on for the next month. Let's brainstorm ways to enhance that area and really help. And so we have a very low graduate teaching assistant, GTA to student ratio for our online program. We have, I think each GTA right now has got 4 or 5 students. They check in with them weekly. They work with them where they are at. It's kind of like getting to that individualized learning program, right? You've got a GTA who mastered the program just last year. They did well, they succeeded, and now they're help guiding the next generation, the next cohort that's coming through in order to help them through the areas where that person is struggling. And not only does that help our current students, but it gives an idea. It teaches our GTAs, right? It teaches our GTAs to apply everything they learned, right? Because it's one thing to learn, right? See one, do one, teach one, right? It's one thing to see. You could watch 1,000 videos of someone changing a tire and be like, oh yeah, I got this. When you get up there, it's a different ball game, right? It's like, oh, I actually have to do this. And that's where you learn, right? This is why the whole, on the job training, right? This is where it's at, right? Medical school students, they go through 2 years of book work, right? And then they take their step, right? But they go through 2 years of book work, but when they get into the clinic, then it's like, oh my goodness, now I have to apply all this. And that is where I would argue that the majority of actual learning occurs. It's on the job. And so what we're doing with our students is we're creating little what I like to call microvids. We call it the 2 to 3 minute videos that they create explaining one subject. And they have to create a little mini video. We get to see their face. They get to draw. I said it could be as easy of them drawing something on a piece of paper and holding up that piece of paper and just explaining it. But it gets them doing learning, right? It's active learning at its best. So a little bit more of a long-winded answer to your question about AI and how, the types of conversations we're having.
I do think that's a great way to frame things too, and it's consistent with what my own experience was as a student. It's one thing to type a paper, and I could type the heck out of the paper, but it's very, very different to turn the camera on and say, hey, you know what, this is the concept that I'm thinking of, and at least have those initial conversations and practice, thinking through something in real time. But having said that, I think I'm going to ask you one last question because otherwise I think we will talk the afternoon
That's right.
away.
Hey, I've got no time here. So,
well, let me just say, what would be kind of your closing call to action to a student or a prospective student who's considering the master's in physiology? They're curious, they want to learn more.
Right.
They're a little trepidatious with what AI may or may not be. They're worried about, will this pay off down the road? What would you tell those prospective students?
So I would tell them that if they've seen any of the movies where they look at someone who's got all the facts memorized versus someone who truly understands a subject, right? The the one who understands it is the one who either succeeds or goes on, who's better at it, right? Einstein said, "Any fool can know. The point is to understand. Any fool can know. The point is to understand." And so that's what physiology is. And I would argue that we are the best in the nation right now in conveying and training our students, not just with the knowledge, but with the understanding, with the mechanism, the why behind why the heart beats or how it works. We will work side by side with you, with our current students, and we will with our prospective students. We are here for you inside the classroom, outside the classroom. We give our a lot of the faculty in the program, once you're in the program, we give our personal numbers out, because if you've got an issue, just call us in terms of like if there's a question you can't understand, you can't get a hold of us, then, well, they can always get a hold of us. We've got email, we've got Teams chat, we've got weekly meetings that I call them town halls, that we host with the GTAs. The faculties and the GTAs get together at multiple times throughout the week, and we just have open Q&As about the program. You could be any level of the program, and we will answer your question. We'll work through the concept with you and ensure that you understand the concept so that you can better help your patients. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help your patients. It really doesn't help you at all either in your job market and what you want to do with your careers if you just memorize facts, right? That can only get you so far, right? It's understanding and learning the tools and gaining the tools necessary to gain that understanding is really what I think U of L physiology provides. And that's something that I'm very proud of and that we're going to continue to innovate in. And yeah, you definitely won't be a number. You are a named person to us. We have students that we meet, we discuss with different topics on a weekly basis. We have conversations with them, like I said, inside our program and outside. I have students reaching back and saying, "Man, this is amazing. This is what you're doing has really helped not only me in getting a credential, but it's helped my confidence level in the material, because when I was in undergrad or when I was taught earlier, we didn't get this. It was memorization focused, but now I understand. And that's what we're going for here at University of Louisville School of Medicine, Department of Physiology online program.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you all so much again for your time this afternoon, and thank you to the listeners for joining us for this discussion. University of Louisville offers over 70 online programs, which include bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and certificate programs designed to allow you to complete your degree on your schedule. There are transfer credit and scholarship opportunities available for many of our online programs so that you can save time and money on your education. If you'd like to learn more about the online Masters in Physiology, you can click the links in the description of this episode, or you can learn more at ufl.me/obnapod. Again, that's ufl.me/obnapod. Thank you again to Dr. Brainerd for joining us. I hope the rest of you have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.